Okay, well, welcome everybody to today's third and final Resiliency Summit as part of our update to the Colorado Resiliency Framework. We are glad that you are here today to join us as we talk about a number of the strategies and are looking for further discussions around refinement and partnership opportunities. If this is, if you've been here for some of the previous summits, welcome back. If you're here for the first time, we're glad to have you here. I know we'll be talking a little bit about some of the tech housekeeping, but just sort of as a reminder to keep yourself muted. We are going to be breaking into some discussion sessions after a quick intro portion here. So we encourage you all to be active, unmute yourselves, join on video if you'd like, use the chat to ask questions and engage with other participants. We are going to be recording this session. It's just to help us with the note taking for afterwards to make sure that we are capturing all of the feedback that we received today. Same too with the breakouts. We're going to be recording these only for note taking purposes, and we'll be posting summary notes on the project website on our website at coresiliency.com in just a couple of days. And so to kick things off, we have a quick best message from Governor Polis that we will play here for you now.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to kick off today's Resiliency Summit as part of the update to the Colorado Resiliency Framework. This broad group of stakeholders from across Colorado gathered here today virtually and in person has been instrumental over the past months, helping the Colorado Resiliency Office really make a difference in providing long-term resiliency in our state. Though this is the third and final summit before the framework is completed later this year, the work does not end. The conversations you'll be engaged in today are focused on forming and leveraging partnerships to get the hard work done over the next several years. We know that we cannot go it alone for the framework to succeed. We need to tap into the knowledge, creativity, experience, and expertise of partners from local government, community organizations, universities, and more. And I want to challenge all of you to enter the discussions with a collaborative spirit so that the state and all of the stakeholders can forge ahead, coordinated, ready to tackle the key challenges. I'm so pleased to see that this update to the Colorado Resiliency Framework has brought together all sorts of players from ag and public health and housing and education, among so many others. This cross-sector strategy leads to the best result, more holistic approaches that address Colorado's environmental, economic, and social challenges. And I look forward to seeing the final strategies that come out of the process, help see them through into the framework, and help be a constructive part of implementation. As I mentioned at the last summit, your work today continues to move the needle on resiliency. Protect the things we value: our people, our vibrant communities, our way of life, our natural environment. Thank you, and I look forward to partnering with you to make it happen.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you to Governor Polis for kicking off our third virtual Colorado Resiliency Summit. My name is Ann Miller, and I'm the Colorado Resiliency Office Director in the Department of Local Affairs. And I am thrilled to be together with you today. We have some important work to do. As I said at the kickoff summit in April, we are determined that this resiliency framework update will be strategic. It will be actionable and impactful. But you're key to making that happen. You're a leader, a thinker, and a doer, and that's why you're here today. So we're at the stage of this project where the rubber hits the road. So please accept this as an invitation to be an agent of change for the future we want. Great things are possible when we work together. So let's get to work for the summit. Next slide, please. So today I'll just spend a few minutes orienting us on where we are at in the project. And we'll also be hearing from some CRO staff as well as Chris Sturm from the Colorado Water Conservation Board. At 12:30, we're going to shift into group discussions, and each person will be able to attend 2 45-minute sessions of their choice. The group discussions will be organized around 6 resiliency priorities that have emerged from our planning process. And the discussions, as Rob said, will focus on partnership opportunities, alignment with existing efforts, and examples and models across the country and world that we can draw inspiration from. Shelby from the Brendel Group will then explain how we're going to transition to these discussion groups at the conclusion of our overview session here. So in the meantime, be thinking about which of the 2 priority areas that you would like to attend and participate in the group discussions. And per our tradition with our summits, we will be holding a digital happy hour at 4 o'clock to have some fun reconnecting and socializing. So join us if you can, and we'll be back at this link for that session. Next slide, please. So we'll ask of you today to be full participants in the summit as we refine our priority strategies and align and leverage our work to make the greatest impact. And we'll ask you to step up and be part of the implementation efforts, so don't be shy. This framework update, next slide please, is at the core of the Colorado Resiliency Office's charge to infuse resiliency into state agency efforts and investments, as well as help communities prepare for and recover from disruptions and build back better. Our project team has been hard at work. Brendel Group has kept us organized as our project consultant, and we've also had so many volunteers from across state agencies and partners that have served as leaders in the 6 sectors, putting many hours convening the teams, synthesizing ideas, and providing strategic direction. So thank you. We also have the Center for Risk-Based Community Resilience Planning housed at CSU, and they've been providing some good national research and context. Next slide. Resiliency, as we know, is defined as the ability of communities to rebound positively, adapt to, and thrive amidst changing conditions or challenges, and we have a lot of those right now. The framework is an opportunity for our state to strategically take action together to create the future we want. We've talked a lot about that, being imaginative, being creative, uniting around our common values for a safe, healthy, livable Colorado for everyone. Next slide. Together, we're working to build adaptive capacity to tackle disruptions, whatever they may be: floods, wildfires, chronic stressors like affordable housing and drought, and the intense economic and social inequities that have been exacerbated by the pandemic that we need to address head on. These are some really challenging times and tough problems to solve that will require an all-hands-on-deck effort, we know, as we chart toward the future. Next slide. So over the last several months, we've been very busy soliciting input, and thank you for being part of that process. All the sector breakout sessions, the surveys, the roundtable discussions, all of these voices have shaped the priorities and strategies that have emerged and we're going to be digging into today. So we're going to be focusing on kind of refining those strategies, again, aligning on the implementation roles and resources, what it's going to take to get the job done. And we are excited about all of the interest and involvement in the update and hope to really keep this momentum going as we get to work. Next, I want to pass it over to Marguerite. I gain a lot of inspiration as I hear stories of resiliency across the state. And just last week, we had this amazing roundtable discussion with high school students. It was really, really inspiring. I'm going to pass it off to Marguerite Harden, the CRO Local Resiliency Manager, and she's going to share additional stories and survey highlights of input from individuals and organizations across Colorado. So take it away, Marguerite.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne. As Anne said, I'm Marguerite. I'm the Local Resiliency Manager with the CRO, and I'm excited to look back on everyone we've connected with over the last, now going into the 3rd summit. To date, we've connected with over 250 people through the 3 summits, as well as 2 sector-specific work sessions and roundtable discussions. And we, since the last summit, also issued out a survey to both organizations and individuals, really looking to gain feedback on working draft priorities that we've all created together. We got great feedback from over 550 respondents who expressed really high level of interest in all of the priorities that we've been vetting, and really wanting to take part in refining them. So the survey just closed last week, and we're still analyzing some of those results, but I can share a few quick takeaways. Here you can see a lot of the zip codes that are represented, and that was one goal of our survey, was to really grab a diverse audience who can give us feedback, who haven't necessarily been to the table yet. And that shows that about 25% of Colorado zip codes are represented in the survey. And interestingly enough, both the individual survey and the organizational survey asked respondents to rank their top resiliency concerns, and both surveys actually agreed on these top 5. There were 14 different options that they had to choose from, but these top 5 were in this order, the same across the individual and organizational survey. So you can see it's the economic stress, housing availability and affordability, followed by wildfires, climate change, and drought. And they also agreed that the top resiliency priority is jobs. So we know we have buy-in on these topics. Also interesting was that climate change had the most #1 votes, but the fact that it still came in as the #4 top concern says to me that economic stress and housing and wildfires are much more common ground concerns throughout the state of Colorado. So that will be interesting to think about as we refine some of our strategies and priorities as we talk today during the summit. If we can go on to the next slide. We also heard, besides the ranking of the priorities, a lot of comments. And as you might all foresee, a lot of these comments related to just the interconnectedness of these topics. So clearly housing availability and affordability and economic stress and jobs are all very related, as are climate change and wildfires and drought. And going even further, we have a strategy that links market-based incentives to environmental and climate change issues. And so thinking not just about climate change as being separate from the economy will be really important as we discuss today and further refine our strategies. I was also really inspired to see that 75% of the individuals were really keen to get involved in local government and policy to build community capacity. And we had a lot of buy-in across all of the different priorities for partnership, but we did have the most response from organizations. We had about 50% that said that they wanted to support community capacity activities. So that was really great. If we can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the resiliency stories. We kind of did a switch partway through the survey where we stopped asking people to be so quantitative and be a little bit more storytelling, as Anne was saying. And I've dug into those, and it was really inspiring to read a lot of perspectives. I even enjoyed the one salient point that someone said, "What is this? You want me to write a book? You asked this to be an 8-minute survey." And it's a good point that, we really did want to get some feel-good stories out of a survey that hopefully didn't take too long. That comment also makes me really appreciate the next stories that I'm about to share with you. So if you go to the next slide. This story is from a banker in rural Colorado who acknowledged just the link between disaster events and economy, just as I was talking about those top 5 resiliency concerns being really interlinked and interconnected. And so that really hits home for what we're talking about today, is just how important these priorities are, but also how intertwined they are. Next slide. And a lot of the story is also related to just current shocks and stresses that we're feeling with COVID, as well as the wildfires. And I really enjoyed this quote here, which talked about an artist who, during the COVID, has found a lot of support, both morally and economically, from the Artists Guild in their community, and just the importance of that community development, both before and during disasters, and also how that links between communities and jobs in the economy. And the next slide. This is perhaps my favorite quote. It really hit into, why I thought collecting stories would be really important in the survey, but just simply community resiliency being really important. And from this person's perspective, just by listening to other stories and really finding empathy in that. And with that, I'm excited to hear Chris Sturm, who is the Watershed Protection Director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board story. So over to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Marguerite. Really appreciate the time. Again, I'm Chris Sturm, the Watershed Program Director with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And just as an aside, I'll let you guys know I'll be super inspired if I don't have a 9-year-old running through here in a few moments yelling about his next meeting, as he calls them, for school. So we'll see if we can get through that. But I'm quickly going to just talk about where we've been since the first resiliency plan in relation to watershed health and natural resources and some of the ongoing issues. I call them opportunities that we're facing, and then where we see that going. And Marguerite, your actions really resonated as I'm looking at the natural resource ones and seeing wildfires and drought sandwiched with climate change sandwiched in between them. Because in my world, in watershed health, wildfires and drought are really climate change manifesting itself. And so we've had to get really creative on how we put together multi-objective projects to have more resiliency in our watersheds. And in 2015, when we were recovering from the floods on the Front Range, we had some frustration working in the stream channels along the Front Range when we're looking at damaged properties that were outside of the 100-year floodplain. And in fact, over 50% of flood insurance claims in Colorado from damages outside of the 100-year floodplain. And that led us into some new thinking about how we manage our floodplains. And we got some legislative funding to create the Fluvial Hazard Zone program. And the Fluvial Hazard Zone is an area that a stream has historically occupied, is occupying, or could occupy. And really, it's a new tool that we have now that helps us look at risk within the floodplain. But it also helps us look at opportunities. I joke around with the folks that work with me, and I call it the FOZ, the Fluvial Opportunity Zone. Because while it is a hazard zone, there are a lot of opportunities in there as well. And once we define that zone, then we have a better idea of where risk is, and we can talk to communities about protecting that zone. We have a model ordinance that can be adopted that's associated with our mapping program. And once we protect that zone, then we can really look at ways to increase resiliency in our watersheds. And one example of where we're going with that is working with our traditional forest health partners and source water protection partners as we look at wildfires and drought. And we see a great need to protect our water resources in between our intakes, our diversions for reservoirs, and our communities, in between that area and where we're seeing the wildfires. And this fluvial hazard zone area or opportunity zone could be pretty critical as far as identifying depositional areas within that zone where we can store debris and sediment in the event of a fire after a flood. So that's one way that we're looking and moving forward. And we hope to make these multi-objective projects with more partners. And for example, these areas where we could store sediment are oftentimes agricultural areas, rangeland areas. And we could see that in those areas, the stream channels either need protection or restoration before they can function well for us post-fire, pre-flood. And so we could work with our agricultural partners to protect those riparian areas, possibly improve their groundwater resources, their ability to divert water, especially in areas where the channel's been incised into the landscape. So that's just one example we have of some of the multi-objective projects that we're going to be looking at to impart resiliency. We've also been talking to the Water Quality Control Division about partnering with them and using our grant resources to do planning together, knowing that we've got a lot of common objectives. So I hope that was a little inspiring for you. It certainly was for me, because there's no 9-year-old running through here yet. And I appreciate the time. And I think we're going to kick it back to Rob now.
Thanks, Chris. And I realized at the top of the hour when I kicked things off, I failed to introduce myself. And so for those who I have not met yet here today, my name is Rob Presley. I am the Resiliency Program Manager in the Colorado Resiliency Office. And Chris, thanks for talking about some of the successes that we've seen out of the previous framework. I think we're really excited to see what's going to come out over the next 5 years from this framework. And just to do a very quick overview of kind of how we're organizing things within the framework and sort of what the next steps are, I just want to kind of briefly go through some of those details. If you're not familiar, we are organizing the framework around a central vision that's been supported by 5 goals and 7 resiliency priorities, or actually 6 resiliency priorities. And then within those priorities are a set of key strategies that we want to implement over the next couple of years, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. Do you want to go to the next slide? And so what you see here on the screen is the vision for the framework. Basically, we are really focusing on that bolded part around forward-thinking solutions and looking into the future about what do we need to be addressing now so that in the future we are more resilient to changing conditions and challenges. And so those forward-thinking solutions, again, are what the focus of the conversation here today is going to be about. Next slide. And then here you see are the 5 goals that we have for the framework as well, really about identifying and mitigating risk, enhancing resiliency planning and capacity, developing policies that empower resiliency, really fostering resiliency, equity, and holistic solutions, and then also building in equity and resiliency into our investments across the state. And so, to meet these goals, it's going to really require a lot of collaboration and partnership across the different strategies that we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. And then here's a quick graphic we showed a little bit earlier where, we've organized the framework around the 3 sort of themes that you see on the outer rings there around addressing social equity and unique community needs, economic vibrancy and diversity, and risks from natural and other hazards. And then there's a 4th theme that's sort of on that inner ring around climate change, knowing that climate change is going to be something that is going to exacerbate a lot of the risk and vulnerabilities across all of those. And then at the center are the 6 resiliency sectors that we have, and they were the same 6 resiliency sectors from the first framework. And that is a way for us to organize and think through the different risks and vulnerabilities that we have across the state, and thinking through opportunities to build in strategies that not just enhance, one sector, but are really cross-cutting across multiple sectors. Next slide. And as I mentioned, we have 6 resiliency strategies or priorities that you see here around future-ready and economy and workforce, climate and natural hazard resiliency, building and infrastructure sustainability, agriculture and food security, housing attainability, and community capacity. And really, we worked with leaders and technical experts from all of those 6 sectors throughout the process, or throughout this project, coming up with a number of different things that we need to focus on. And this is kind of the big sort of priority buckets that a lot of the strategies and ideas that we had been discussing through these summits and other meetings kind of boiled down to. You'll see that they are not necessarily aligned one-to-one with the different resiliency sectors that we have. And that was really intentional, on our part. Really, we're wanting to develop priority areas that allow for cross-sector collaboration and ones that build in resiliency, again, across those different sectors. And so then within each of these priority areas are a set of strategies that we're going to be discussing today around further refining them, looking for partnership opportunities for implementation. So you want to go to the next slide? We are really kind of here honing in on the final stretch of the framework. We are planning on releasing the finalized version of the framework in December, so just a couple of months away. We'll have a first preliminary draft coming up next month that we're going to, as an internal project team, be reviewing, and then there will be a second draft that's available for public review in November. So we'll be sure to send out information about how to review that draft, give us your feedback, and we certainly encourage you to take a look when that is available, because again, we want to make sure that the ideas that we're discussing today are fully captured within the framework document.